we get that started, I'm going to go ahead and then share my screen. Okay, you guys should be seeing the CSNO title page. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, and I don't have my, can I get a thumbs up if you guys are seeing my screen? Okay, thank you. All right, so as we did introductions, I again am Susan Carr, Executive Director of CSNO, and what we're going to talk about today is really learning a very basic introduction to Community Services Block Grant of Wyoming, and we're going to increase our knowledge about that. We're going to talk just very briefly about the history. We'll talk about the goals, the federal and national goals for CSBG, and what the role of our board and our organizational standards and what does Roma mean. And we're not going to be able to cover everything in this onboarding presentation. So we'll take deeper dives later into Roma, organizational standards, MPIs, and CAP 60. But I want you guys to know that there's always monthly training opportunities through CSNO on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month, where we can cover a lot of these different topics in greater detail. And we can also offer one-on-one or in-person or virtual meetups with anybody in your agency or your boards. So before we get started, does anybody have any questions? Okay, I'm going to warn you, because this is kind of standard information, it is not the most engaging training. It's kind of me talking and me stopping every once in a while and checking to see if anybody has any questions. And I can see the chat, so if anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop a note into the chat. So can everybody see the learning objective slides? I want to make sure you're seeing everything. Okay, thanks, Erin. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So the enactment of the Economic Opportunity Act is what created the Community Action Agency. In addition to the Equal Opportunity Act, or the EOA, the Civil Rights Act and legislation that created Head Start were enacted. And these were all parts of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society and his war on poverty. The original legislation supporting the Community Action Network provides the basis for family, community, and agency models of community action. And in Johnson's very first State of the Union address on June 8th, he called for an unconditional war on poverty to defeat poverty as we knew it at that time. He expanded and revised the proposals given to President Kennedy at the time, and then developed the Economic Opportunity Act, and it included several different initiatives. It included a lot of programs that we all know about and we hear about all the time, like Head Start, Job Corps, work-study programs for university students, Volunteers in Service to America, or the VISTA program, which is a domestic version of the Peace Corps. It expanded and created basic education and adult job training, community action programs, and at the time, they had received about $1 billion to divide among all these various programs, and it was critically underfunded. By 1966, though, Congress appropriated $4 billion for all these programs. As part of that, there was CSBG, which is the Community Services Block Grant Program. Today, that program alone is a $725 million block grant to use across every state in the union. States receive these funds according to a statutory formula, and then they turn around and distribute those funds, with about 90% of those funds to CSBG entities across the state of Wyoming. And these entities provide services and activities that were designed to address employment, nutrition, emergency services, and healthcare. And most of these services that are being provided today include employment training and placement, income management, education, emergency services, health, nutrition, transportation, housing assistance, and then also providing linkages or partnerships and collaborations among other anti-poverty programs. So in order to do this and provide this funding, they set aside national goals to provide the Community Action Network a broad target to aim for. And CSBG is the funding stream that provides all these services in Wyoming through our eligible entities. Now, CSBG is designed to be a flexible spending source that allows communities to address the causes and conditions of poverty based on the needs of their individual community. And these goals then give a network a basis for measuring whether the work we're doing is in alignment with the mission of CSBG, which, as you can see, is a reduction of poverty, the revitalization of low-income communities, and the empowerment of low-income families and individuals to become self-sufficient. So these goals used to be 6 national goals, but we kind of reduced those and redesigned those in 2017 with a new emphasis on community level work. Now, in order to differentiate between community level work and individual or family level work, we refer to these services as strategies if we're looking at agency and community needs. If we're looking at just individuals or families, we call those services. So when we look at what the 3 national goals of CSBG are, number 1 is looking at individuals and families with low income are stable and achieve economic security. Goal 2 is where we have communities where people with low incomes are healthy and our communities offer economic opportunity. And number 3, people with low incomes are engaged and active in building opportunities in our community. And you're going to hear this a lot because what we call experienced users or customers or families or individuals living in poverty have a big say in what that service and how our communities look as we move forward. So the mission of CSBG and how it can be used to alleviate poverty can be used in several different ways, but it must always be used to assist people with low income. So currently, the authorization or federal law identifies that as people who are living at 125% of the federal poverty level or lower. Currently, we are working on a authorization that allows us to work with families who are at 200% or lower of the federal poverty level. This poverty level income guideline is good until December 3rd, at which time we were looking for the 3rd ever reauthorization of the CSBG bill, and that will permanently move that income verification up to 200%. So while we're currently working on that now, if the reauthorization bill doesn't pass in Congress, we would look at that going back to 125%. And we rely on Aaron at the state to convey those eligibility qualifications to us through Dear Colleague letters. Now, CSBG can be used to address the concerns and conditions of poverty at the individual level. And this is where you see the most of services being provided in the state of Wyoming. However, it can address needs at the community and the agency level. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later, or what that could possibly look like in your agency. because CSBG is really designed to be the glue that brings all together all the different resources that assist people in poverty. It is the only federal poverty program with a broad mission of moving people from poverty to self-sufficiency. So it can be used to provide services to anyone, regardless of religion, age, race, sex, gender, sobriety, past criminal convictions, or citizenship. So CSBG is that flexible funding source to allow communities to address poverty at the local level. And some of those major areas that CSBG can be used for are what you're seeing up here, which we call domains. So it can be used in employment, in education and cognitive development, income, infrastructure, housing, health and social behavioral, civic engagement, community involvement, and then of course, services that support multiple of those multiple domains. And we are going to talk about that in greater detail later in this presentation. But there are ways that I want you to guys know that we can't use CSBG funding. First of all, there are very few federal limitations, but the state can determine any additional restrictions. And if you go to the Wyoming Department of Health, you can see the link. There's a highlighted link on here, and we can go ahead and look at those later, and also look at the 2022 annual plan. You're going to be able to find these on the Wyoming Department of Health CSP website. But primarily, we know that CSBG cannot be used for purchase or improvement of land. We can't do permanent or construction or improvements to our buildings. There are some exceptions to that rule, especially when it gets down into that low cost residential weatherization or other energy related repairs. You also cannot use CSBG for any partisan or nonpartisan political activity or any political activity that's associated with a candidate, contending faction or group, or in an election for public or party office. We also cannot use, and this is going to get kind of wonky, but we can't use CSBG to provide voters with transportation to the polls. And we can't use it for any voter registration activity. However, if you remember, if you go back, there are some civic things that we can do to help families. Just know that CSBG funding cannot be used for those things that I just talked about. One of the things that you're going to find is that there are a lot of acronyms that we use at CSBG and in community action. We have Roma and LEAP and LEWAP and MPIs and NCAP and all these different organizational words. And I kind of want, or these organizational acronyms. And I kind of want to talk to you a little bit about that. The federal government and the state government, we're really, really good at using acronyms and shortening up language. So I wanted to kind of show you in the next slide what that looks like and how the network looks. So CSBG is housed in Health and Human Services. And they are then found under ACF, or the Administration of Children and Families, in the Office of Community Services. Dr. Laniqua Howard is the director of the Office of Community Services, and she provides leadership and oversight of over $6 billion in mandatory and discretionary grants through 6 social service and community development programs. And all of those are designed to work with families experiencing or living in poverty. So some of the programs that are administered by OCS or the feds. So when we talk about the feds or OCS, that's one and the same, is community economic development programs, community service block grant, which is us, low income home energy assistance programs, low income household water assistance programs, rural community development, the social services block grant, and assets for independence. So all of those fall under OCS. Next door Across the hallway is the Office of Head Start. And so our sister agency under the Administration of Children and Families is Head Start. And we share a lot of the same goals, the same objectives, the same reporting, and some of the same funding. So that's kind of what it looks like at the national level. Then OCS, through that statutory formula, gives money to each one of the states. And our state office that manages CSBG funding is the Wyoming Department of Health, Rural and Frontier Health, under communities, or then under that is under the Community Services Program led by Aaron Doak, who we met earlier in the training. The state office administers CSBG at the state level, and they are a super important piece of the Community Action Network because they're the ones that are ensure community action agencies are held accountable by conducting monitoring. They make sure that the community action has a wide footprint in the state of Wyoming and is offering services in many places in the state as possible. And they're the ones that disperse all of our CSBG funding. And they alone are the ones who appoint new CSBG eligible entities when appropriate. Now in our state, we have 15 agencies or eligible entities or CAAs or CAPs. You'll hear them referred to all in the same way. CAPs are community agency programs. CAAs are community action agencies. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how that looks in Wyoming because we're divided into private and public offices or agencies. And that's pretty unique. Because in most states, they have moved away a little bit from the public community action program and moved towards nonprofit or private community action programs like High Country Behavioral Health or Compass Center for Families. And in our region, which is Region 8, and that's called the RPIC. There are 6 states in our RPIC, and RPIC stands for Regional Performance Innovation Consortia. It's a lot of words to just say this is a regionally focused training and technical assistance program or mechanism that's there to help strengthen the effectiveness and the efficiency of our programs at the state level, at the association level, and at the local level, like you guys. So OCS funds 10 different RPIC grants across the state, with each one of them having 5 to 10 states in each one of them, and we belong to Region 8. Now, Region 8 is made up of Colorado, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Utah, and Wyoming. And I sit on the board of directors for the RPIC Region 8 program. The RPICs are the ones that provide valuable training to the network in several different ways. They provide support to me. They provide support to Aaron at the state office. And the regional conferences come up, and Roma cohorts and webinars are all just a bunch of different opportunities that the RPICs help fund. In each state, a region has, or excuse me, in each state in our region has a state association that leads and collaborates with the state of Wyoming Department of Health in providing training and technical assistance in our state. And we're called Community Service Network of Wyoming. We provide all that training and technical assistance to our members, and including how to reach full compliance on organizational standards, HR questions, annual reporting, Roma, and more. And state associations are partly funded by the RPIC to be able to do things like state conferences and provide training around the state or travel to each one of the individual eligible entities in the state, so we can go ahead and provide all of that and just be strong membership for you. Then we have national partners. So national partners is the national, we call it NCAP, This is the National Community Action Partnership, and this is a membership organization primarily providing training and best practices for local community action agencies like you and the state association. Often this is just referred to as the partnership or NCAP. CAPLA is the membership organization primarily provided legal advice and assistance for local community action agencies and state associations. So these are our lawyers. These are the legal arm and help us provide and get all of the guidance that comes down from OCS translated to us so we know how to be compliant with all of the federal law. And then there's NASCASP, and that's the National Association of State Community Service Programs. And this is also a membership organization that primarily provides training and supports and technical assistance to state offices. So this is where Erin goes for all of her collaborations on the state government office to get all of the stuff that they need. They also manage all the data collection process for the CSBG annual report. So when you guys see these smart forms come out, it's NASCAS that's sending that along. Again, the Office of Community Services, I'm sorry, I already did that one. National Community Action Foundation, or NCAF, is the primary organization that lobbies for the community action programs. They do not receive any federal funding. They are often referred to as just David. It's David Bradley at the federal level. And he's the one who goes and speaks to all of our senators and representatives and helps them understand what community action looks like at the local level. How did we respond during COVID? And why do we, he provides that justification for why community action is so important in our community. So that's how we're laid out. Again, in Wyoming, we're rather unique in the fact that we have public and private caps. Wyoming is only one of 2 states in our region that does that provides private and public caps. Private Community Action Agency is a 501c3 organization that's governed by a tripartite board. An example of a private CAA would be WYO Helps or Compass Center for Families. We provide that service for the tripartite board in Johnson County. WYO Helps is a good example because they run several different programs such as self-sufficiency, housing, food security programs, and they serve 6 counties. A public community action agency can be either a local government department that is overseen by a tripartite board or a local government board that is tripartite board in structure. So an example of a public CAA would be Campbell County Care Board in the state of Wyoming. And this board is set up as an advisory board to the county commissioners in Campbell County. This board does not provide any direct services themselves, but instead subgrants that money out to other nonprofits in the community. Some public caps in Wyoming are the provider of services. So it looks a lot of different ways and it can be kind of confusing. Now, subgrantees are typically not considered to be a community action agency and thus do not have to have their own tripartite board, but they are still a very, very important part of the community action network. So in the state of Wyoming, what that looks like in our private one, Community Action of Laramie County, Yellowstone County Assistance Program, High Country Behavioral Health, Teton County 122 are all examples of private agencies running that are being funded by CSBG. Publicly, that looks like Uinta Human Services, Community Action Partnership of Natrona, Fremont County, Albany County, and others. And as I stated earlier, Community Action Agency is any organization designated by a state as a CSBG eligible entity. Now let's talk about tripartite boards really, really quick. Tripartite boards are federally required for any agency who receives CSBG funding. Sometimes that looks like a governing board, sometimes that looks like an advisory board, and each community action agency is governed by one of them. A tripartite board is structured in compliance by federal law and needs to look like at least 1/3 of the board must be local elected officials. 1/3 needs to look like a membership from major groups or general interest in the community. And the most important is at least 1/3, a minimum of 1/3, must be democratically selected representatives of the low income community. And that can be really hard sometimes for tripartite boards to manage that requirement. So many times we're not able to have actual experienced users on our board. So many times tripartite boards meet that requirement by having someone from Section 8 housing, or someone from a school, or someone from a senior center, a senior citizen center that represents an age or a population that's at risk or is experiencing poverty. So those can be kind of a challenge. And we spend a whole lot of time doing direct training opportunities for boards to help them understand what their role is on a tripartite board. In addition to that tripartite board, the reason why it's so important is because a lot of times our staff members transition, programs change. The board is there really to offer that consistency in purpose, intent, and the responsibility of the CSBG funding. And the board acts as a body, not as an individual, but they are the ones who are bound by fiduciary duties. They bear all the legal responsibility and for themselves and for the corporation. So it's really, really hard. Board members shoulder a significant responsibility for the oversight. And like I said, CSNO offers much more in-depth, intensive training opportunities specifically for board members of community action agencies. We really go deep into Roma for boards, strategic planning, legal aspects for board memberships, and how to work within and with your community. CSNO also, or excuse me, CSBG boards also are required by law to fully participate in the development, planning, implementation, and evaluation of programs supported by CSBG. And they have to find ways to fulfill their responsibilities while not dipping into operational activities. So it's really, really hard. So before we go on, I'm just going to take a quick break. Does anybody have any questions about what we have talked about so far? Okay, you guys, we are going to move into organizational standards. And this can be a really challenging, I'm going to go fast through this. This can be a really challenging thing when looking at how we work with and do CSBG in our eligible entities. But it's really important to be able to do this because we are working with billions of dollars of taxpayer money, and we have to find a way to make sure that we are doing what we say that we're going to do. So the CSBG organizational standards is a comprehensive set of standards developed with input from the entire CSBG network. And it took them 3 years to go through and establish these. And they were announced in 2015. The organizational standards are organized into 3 themes comprising 9 categories, and there's a total of 58 standards for private nonprofit entities and 50 standards for public entities. Now, the purpose of the organizational standards is to ensure that all agencies who are working with CSBG and the concerns and conditions of poverty have the appropriate organizational capacity. in both the critical financial capacity and the administrative areas, as well as areas of unique importance to the mission of Community Action Network. So when we take a look at these, we're going to go through each one of them at one at a time. And the first theme that we're going to look at is the maximum feasibility participation. Now, a couple of weeks ago, or several weeks ago, I did an in-depth training on meeting these organizational standards, and you can find that on the See Snow YouTube channel, and you can watch that and see what it takes to be able to meet those standards. I'm not going to go into that much detail this time, but it is there for you if you need it. If you miss that training and you can't find it, just let me know and I'll send you a link to it. So one of the most important things, and I mentioned this earlier, is we talk a lot about consumer input and involvement. And when we talk about consumers, we're referring to our clients or experienced users of people who are experiencing poverty. Community action is really rooted in the belief that people with low incomes are in the best position to express what they need to make a difference in their lives. CSBG eligible entities work in partnership with our clients and the people in our communities that we serve. So community action works in a coordinated and comprehensive manner to develop programs and services that are going to make a critical difference in the lives of its participants and the people we serve. Individuals and families are very well attuned to what they need. And when we tap into that knowledge, it really informs our ability to implement high impact programs and standards. Organizational Standard 2.1 asks us to document how people experiencing low income or poverty, how are they participating in our activities, and how do we analyze that information in our activities, and how do we know it's working? What do we look at? So what are some ways that your agency might use consumer input and involvement? We do it in a couple of different ways. It could look like client surveys. It can look like story collection. It can be the low income representative on our tripartite board that helps us understand and use that important feedback and input into the services that we provide. We also are required to do community engagement, because at the end of the day, no CSBG community action entity or agency can do this all alone. There is no way that one agency can be all things to all people all of the time, and it can't meet all of its community's needs independently. So we are asked to form formal and informal partnerships through ongoing community planning, advocacy, and engagement with people experiencing poverty, our partners in the community and faith-based organizations, our educational institutions, our local governments, and our businesses. We all work together to make sure that we are successfully moving families out of poverty and helping to revitalize our communities. A standard that is asked of us is to make sure that we're able to document or demonstrate partnerships across the community for specifically identified purposes. So these partnerships need to include other anti-poverty organizations in our area. And we do this, again, through what they call linkages, partnerships, our stakeholders, our communities, our board members. And then they also ask us and require us to do community assessments. And local control of federal CSBG resources is really predicated off regular comprehensive community assessments that take into account the breadth of community needs, as well as our partners and resources that are available in our community to meet the needs. So regular assessments are done on a 3-year basis in the state of Wyoming. And this really is the foundation of community action and helps us use it as a vital management and leadership tool that's used across the organization and utilized in our community to set the course for our agency and how we're going to use our resources. Again, needs assessments are done every 3 years to determine the biggest needs in our low-income communities and base our strategic planning, programming, and services off that need. Just as a reminder, there's a current grant application process going on for any agency who has conducted a community needs assessment from March 16th of 2020 or will conduct one by September 30th, 2022. If your agency has done a needs assessment in that time span, you can go to the CSNO website or reach out to me to find out how you can find a grant to help pay for that community needs assessment above and beyond what the discretionary funding you were awarded in that time frame paid for. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. The ceiling on that is $5,000. So we can help an agency take some of that out-of-pocket expense you might have experienced and reimburse you for that. So on to our second theme, which is vision and direction. And community action really takes a look at its leadership. And that's exemplified at all levels across the organization and starts with a mission that clarifies community action's work on poverty. So this requires a well-functioning board, a focused chief executive officer, well-trained and dedicated staff, and volunteers giving of themselves to help others. That's how we establish community action as the cornerstone and the leverage point to really address poverty issues across our local communities. So ensuring that strong leadership, both for today and into the future, is critical. And they recognize that when putting that community organizational standards together. So this category really addresses that foundational elements of a mission statement, as well as the implementation of a model of good performance management. It ensures that community action agencies have really taken the steps to plan thoughtfully for today's work and tomorrow's leadership. So an example of this is organizational standard 4.1. It says, boy, has the governing board reviewed the mission statement within the past 5 years? And are they looking at and ensuring that the program's missions and services are in line with that? So community action boards are really uniquely structured to ensure maximum feasible participation by the entire community by having tripartite boards. And we just talked about that. So to make that structure work as intended, community action agencies must recruit board members thoughtfully. We have to work within our communities to promote opportunities for board service and orient, train, and support them in that oversight role. Boards are the foundation to good organizational performance, and the time invested in them to keep them healthy and active is pretty significant, but really, really necessary. Board governance, excuse me. When we look at establishing the vision for a community action agency, we really want to make sure that we're taking a look at both the internal functioning and the community's needs. And every efficient organization knows where it's headed, how it will measure its success in achieving what it's sent out to do. And this means that we create board-led strategic plans that have measurable outcomes, rather than a plan that just gets written and sits on a shelf and stagnates. We want to make sure that we're setting an ambitious vision that sets the tone for the staff and board and our key leadership. And it is a really strong management tool for the organization. And organizational standard 6.1 requires that an agency-wide strategic plan be in place that's been approved by the governing board within the past 5 years. All right, third and final is our operations and accountability, because the human element of community action is really evident at all levels of our organization, and the relationship that an organization has with its staff often reflects the organization's values and mission. So oversight of your CEO or your executive director and maintaining a strong human resource infrastructure are really key responsibilities of board oversight. Attention to organizational elements such as policies and procedures and performance appraisals and training lead to strong agencies and organizations that have the capacity to deliver high quality services in low income communities. And fiscal operations and oversight are included in this because the fiscal bottom line of any community action agency is not isolated from its mission. It is really a joint consideration. So community action agency boards and staff must maintain a high level of fiscal performance and accountability through audits, monitoring by the state and the federal agencies, compliance with the Federal Office of Management budget circulars. And they take these rules really, really seriously. And this is one of the questions that you'll be asked by the state office is, show us what your tripartite board or advisory board is doing about your audit. What is their knowledge about what's going on fiscally? So organizational standard 8.3 is an example of this, and it shows that our advisory board is notified of the availability of an audit when it has taken place. The Community Action Network also, we're asked to move families out of poverty every day across the country, but we need to produce data that is reflective of that community and that collective impact of these efforts. So individual stories are compelling when they're combined with quantitative data as well. No data without stories, no stories without data. Community action needs to do a better job of documenting the outcomes families, agencies, and communities achieve. The Community Services Block Grant funding confers that obligation and opportunity to tell our story of agency-wide impact and community change and what that impact is on the network as a whole. And in order to do that, one of the standards that they ask us to meet is that we have a system or systems in place to track what these outcomes are going to be. So we do that in a couple of different ways. In Wyoming, we use CAP60, which is an online data tool that allows us to track our families, our cases, our services, our funding models, our funding sources. And we do that each month. Every time we work with a family, this is what it looks like and then you're going to hear us we're talking about our mapping. We're talking about our goals. Are they meeting all of that stuff? And that's really hard when you're like, I don't even know where to start. How do I do those things? And in community action, we do that through Roma. So Roma, which is results-oriented management and accountability, means and asks that agencies have to be result-oriented. That means we're going to focus on the changes that we make. And there needs to be a process in place to assure accountability at all levels. So you're like, okay, what does that mean? Well, I'm going to tell you. Statutorily, by federal law, it is mandated that we need to look at performance-based management principles. The statutory mandate changed both the nature and the pace of Roma implementation throughout the entire network. And we now encourage all of our community action agencies to implement Roma in their agency. So we offer Roma trainings 2 to 3 times a year, or we find other opportunities for you to take those when CSNO is not doing that. So when we look at the principles of Roma, what does that mean? I mean, it sounds good. What does it mean then? It means that we're going to assess the poverty needs and conditions within our community. It means that we're going to define a clear anti-poverty mission and define our strategies and services to address those needs, both in the immediate, the short, and the long term. In the context of using our existing resources and opportunities in our community, It asks us and shows us how to identify specific improvements or results that are expected to be achieved among people experiencing poverty in the communities in which they live. It asks us to organize and implement programs, services, and strategies within our agency and among our partnering organizations to achieve anticipated results. It also asks us to look again at just a cycle. How do we determine how we're going to operate as an organization? So this is the assessment, and we go into this, or excuse me, this is the accountability cycle. And we go into this, and it's a 1.5 day long training that every single one of your leadership people, your boots on the ground staff, your board members are asked to be aware of. So we start with the assessment. What does it look like for our assessment to be in our community? What do we have the capacity to actually do in our agency? The cycle is this process that agencies should go through to keep an emphasis on high quality performance and the achievement of results. Now, although this cycle looks like it goes in a specific order, it doesn't have to be that way. You can move from one stage to the other stage as necessary. For example, if you're in the process of a program and you realize you're not achieving the results you expected, you can go back to the planning phase and take a look at that. As a community action agency, we should be addressing the causes and conditions of poverty in our community. By conducting a needs assessment, we're able to identify the gaps and the needs in a community. And this is going to help us prioritize how we spend our money or give out our resources. The needs assessment is a really important aspect of CSBG, but we really need to plan on how we're going to effectively utilize this funding. So we use logic models. And this logic model that you see in front of you is how we do this. All right, this is what Roma looks like. A logic model is a helpful tool in doing just that. The steps in building a Roma logic model is identifying the needs or the resources in our community. This is done through our community needs assessments. When identifying our need, we need to make sure that we identify that level of need as we are going to address it. Is it an individual or family need? Is it a community need or an agency need? This is because when we plan our work, we're going to be doing different work depending on what type of level we're needing to address. For example, if a family needs childcare, but let me start over. If a family needs childcare, that's a family level need. But what if there's no affordable childcare in the community? Now we have identified a community level need. Yes, not having childcare services in our community means that the family will not be able to access childcare, but you can address the family need by helping one family. If you identify the community need, you're going to have to work with others in our community to create that new opportunity for childcare. And this is also where the agency level can be identified. Does the agency even have the capacity to do that? Do we have the resources, the facilities, the personnel to provide childcare, or do we need to really build partnerships in our community to help others build that community need? So the first thing that we're going to do is take a look at what our mission statement. We see that we have a sample mission statement at the bottom, that our program will assist individuals with low income attain self-sufficiency through job training. We have to identify that need as we just identified it. Okay, so I just talked about childcare as an identified need. In this example, we're saying, you know what, individuals need additional training in order to get a job. So we've identified that. We're like, hey, this is something that we need in our community. This is a family level need or an individual level need. The second step is to identify our intended outcome. The outcome statement should be the exact opposite of the need statement. So for example, if we said, in this case, individuals need additional training to get a specific job, our desired outcome is going to say, yeah, individuals have this training. They have completed the job training. They have obtained employment. Once we have a clear picture of what our outcome is going to look like, or what we want our outcome to look like, we now start planning services and strategies to achieve that outcome. Now we know what we're going to do. We're going to create a way to measure our results. These are our outcome indicators. And I said, we're going to do a lot more of this in much more detail in a Roma training that will be coming later through CSNO. Once we know what our indicator is going to be, we need to know how we're going to measure it. Who's responsible for measuring it? What data are we going to use to collect that can show that we have achieved our outcome? For example, if your outcome is for people with low incomes to obtain affordable housing, maybe a measurement tool that you'll use to show that is a copy of their lease agreement. We want to know who's responsible for collecting this information. We want to know where and how they're going to find this information, where they're going to store this information. And finally, how often is that data going to be collected? How often are we going to report it and analyze it? Identifying the level of need is the most important concepts of Roma. And if we're to be results oriented, we must first know what our need is that we're going to be addressing. All right. So, but if we're not tracking all of our data at the end of it, we cannot provide actual results or understand where we're going. Now, we'll fill in the results at the end of the report period so we know what that actually looks like. Okay. We're going on to another topic here real quick. Does anybody have any questions or anything before we move on? Okay, we're going to wrap this up here real quick. This doesn't take a lot, but I just want to make sure that everybody knows what national performance indicators are, because these are the ones that are actually identifying the service or the strategies that we're going to be using to address the causes and concerns of poverty in our community. MPI determines ways that CSBG funding can be used. Now, remember, our domains, they're health, housing, social, cognitive, emotional, multiple, there's all these different domains that we have. Each one of our national performance indicators, or our MPIs, help us track. These are kind of universal across the country, but agencies may find that they have a unique one. So we're going to, again, look at MPIs because we know that funding can be used. Most commonly, it's used to assist people with low incomes, but it can also be used to address problems at the community level and the agency. We can use these types of performance indicators in employment, education, cognitive, income, asset building, housing, health and social behavior development, and civic engagement and community involvement. So let's take a look at the first domain. When we're looking at employment services at the family or individual level, these are some of the services that you can use to do the following. You can do vocational training. You can do on-the-job training or other work experience. You can put together or pay for youth summer work placements or apprenticeships or skill training. When we look at the community level need, we can use and employ strategies that include living wage campaigns, job creation, job fairs, teaching people how to use the earned income tax credit promotion, or work in partnership to build commercial space development. That is one way that a strategy can be used at the community level. In educational or cognitive development at the family level, these can be Head Start programs, early Head Start programs, or other early childhood education. It can be used in conjunction with K through 12 education or support services or financial literacy education. Remember, we can build linkages to help provide these services to meet those educational and cognitive development pieces. 2 weeks ago, or last week, I guess it was, we watched the Converse County talk about their educational cognitive programming that they're using in Douglas that is helping families grow at the individual level. And it's really an amazing program. Again, if you didn't see that, there's a recording of it that you can go take a look at. But sometimes we may not have the ability to address that at the family or the individual level, and we have to look at that community level. And strategies that we can use at the community level can be like a children's trust fund creation, after school enrichment activities. It can help put together charter school development based on what the local community gaps are. Income infrastructure assets. Again, we can do financial capability skills training. We can do first-time home buyer counseling. Strategies at the community level include police and community relationships, or building a safety watch program. We can start doing programs in our community that talks about financial literacy with children. Housing, this is one that we're seeing across the state in every community, and it can look at services that we might be able to provide. Again, our first-time home buyer counseling, or budgeting classes, or financial coaching and counseling classes. But some of us, like that would be great to be able to provide housing at that family individual level, if only I had the capacity or the inventory. So sometimes we have to look at strategies that include our community as a whole, and that can look like a lot of different things. On your health and social behavioral side, we're looking at things that you can do to help families meet these goals. You can pay for doctor visit payments. You can help them look at prepared meals, maybe food distribution, providing parenting classes, providing supervised visitation programs, pay for prescriptions, dental and vision screenings. One thing that we see a lot of is dental, because in many insurances or Medicaid, dental isn't included because a lot of times it's looked at as cosmetic. But sometimes the simple payment of dentures or dental work can help one individual improve their economic stability by getting a better job, because now they are not missing work due to painful teeth issues or toothaches, or maybe they were missing teeth, which was a barrier to them getting a front of line position that pays better. So those are things that we can do with CSBG funding. And at the community level, we can help put together farmers markets. We can decide to help put together a food bank. We can do gun safety or healthy food campaigns. In Sheridan, we help maintain a free health clinic that helps low-income individuals access the services that they need for health purposes. In civic engagement, we can do voter education, but we can't do access. Remember, we can't do transportation. We can do citizenship classes. Our civic engagement can be met by leadership training or tripartite board membership. Civic engagement at the community level looks like poverty simulations, or what do we need to do to have economic development come into our community to attract capital investments, or how can we build equity? Now, when we're doing agencies, or we're working with agencies that are doing case management, many times the services that we're providing support multiple domains. So case management, referral to agencies or services, transportation, childcare subsidies or payments, criminal record expungements. Each one of those can impact multiple domains as we're working with a family. Being able to provide childcare payment allows somebody to be able to go to work, which helps the employment domain, or helps them make more money, which helps build the asset domain. And we can do this at the strategies at the community level as well. How do we find ways to offer non-traditional hours of childcare or transportation coordination? There's our senior center in Sheridan offers Goose Creek Transit, which is partially funded by CSBG to make sure that families experiencing poverty have the opportunity to get transportation to the places they need to get to. So we all know in Wyoming, transportation is a huge barrier to self-sufficiency. So we, the hub, developed a program at the community level using CSBG funding that allows transportation access. I also talk a lot about agency needs. Many times we'll identify a need in our community or in our families, but we ourselves don't have the agency capacity to be able to meet that need. So agency participation in training or career development, or training somebody to be a specialist in housing, getting your staff trained as certified community action professionals, getting your board members trained. And those are all things that you can use CSBG funding to build your agency capacity. That's a lot. That is a lot of information that I just gave you. And I know that if you're new going into community action, that can be overwhelming for a lot of people. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to ask any questions or reach out to me to say, hey, Susan, can you come talk to my board about CSBG funding opportunities for agency capacity building, because the federal government recognizes how important that is. Emergency stabilization funding done by most of us in the state of Wyoming is important too. But we want to be able to ask ourselves, how do we address the federal objective of moving families or individuals out of poverty into self-sufficiency? And sometimes we can't do that with strictly emergency funding. We have to do that through intentional case management or intensive individual work that allows us to do that. Any questions about what you guys saw today? I know, exactly. Fire hose, I know, it's like a fire hose. There's a lot of information that's being sent to you. Chad and Valerie, you are on the executive, or you're on the board, executive board too, of a community action agency. While you're not the tripartite board, you are the ultimate governing board who oversees what it looks like in Johnson County. So a lot of this is like, oh my God, I didn't know we had that many responsibilities. A lot of that is taken up by the tripartite board. But this is, you guys just helped me actually meet one of the organizational standards by attending this meeting. So thank you very much for doing so. Any questions? All right, you guys, thank you so much. Again, not the most engaging training that we do here. It is an extremely brief overview of CSBG. For those of you that are new, welcome aboard. We're thrilled to have you. And it is so much fun. And I am a CSBG nerd. So, I love everything about community action. So please do not hesitate to reach out. And if you want me to do a site visit and work with you in person or virtually, just let me know. In the meantime, thank you all. And I will see you at our next monthly board training, or excuse me, monthly training, which is the 4th Tuesday. And we're going to be talking about our community needs assessments. And now that we have them, what do we do with them? I'll talk to you guys all later then. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.